Well, hello and welcome to Rosington Community Baptist Church on a beautiful day. And here I am, not actually at the church, as you can see. I'm at Rosington Miners Welfare. Now, before 1912, Rosington was tiny. Just a few little houses here and there, a couple of little villages, next to nothing. But then the government decided to sink a mine here. And then from about 1914 to in the 90s, this place mushroomed. It became huge, a big village, a big town, a mining village. Everything in the town, in the village of Rosington, was to do with the mine. You either worked in the mine or you worked for somebody who worked in the mine. So everything to do with the mine, and then the hairdressers who supplied their services and all the different people, everything in this village revolved around the mine. So your neighbours weren't just your neighbours, they're also your work colleagues. And also, this was set up very soon after the start of the mine. You also socialised with those same people. So here at the Miners Welfare, people would have their celebrations, their parties, they would come for talks and different things like this. It was very much the community of the miners here in Rosington. So when the mine was gradually slowed and then stopped completely in the 80s and 90s, it decimated not just people's livelihoods but the whole community, because everything was interwoven, everything worked together. And here as well is where they formed the football club, Rosington Main. And so people played together as well. To live in Rosington meant you were associated with the mine. It was your community, your extended family, everyone interrelated, living lives together as part of the community in Rosington. So of course, whenever there's a tragedy or some mishap at the mine, then the whole community grieved together like a family. Come with me now. I want to take you somewhere else. We need to be quick. Right, good. We made it. Under normal circumstances, on a Saturday, the Keepmoat Stadium is absolutely buzzing with thousands of people wearing their red and white shirts and the red and white scarves, etc. Football brings people together. People love to come and watch, and they join the rest of the fan club for their team to cheer them on. People find a real community within the sports team fan clubs. People spend a lot of money, a lot of time. They buy all the merchandise, they read all the magazines, they find out all they can, they watch the television, and then they sit around with their friends and they talk about the latest goings on. There's a real affinity between one Doncaster Rovers fan and another one. And sometimes antagonism towards those who support a different team. But they themselves, within their group, the team they support, they find community. They find support, they find encouragement, they find identity. And these people can be like a second family to them. Now in Rosington, everyone was brought together by the mine. Here at the stadium, it's for the love of the team, the football, and there's young and old men and women. Football is a great unifier. You go to a big city like Liverpool or Manchester, they'll ask you, or even Sheffield, what side are you on? Are you a red shirt or a blue shirt? Are you City or United? Wednesday or United? Everton or Liverpool? There's a great community around football. Though of course at the moment it's very difficult for people who do love to be in the crowds and cheering on their team as part of a groundswell of support and encouragement. Okay, let's go back to Rosington. Come on. As people, we love to attach ourselves to a group, don't we? We gather together with people of a like mind, maybe at the miners' welfare, with other miners and other people dependent on the mine, maybe at the football ground with other supporters of our team. Maybe we like to sing in a choir, maybe we're part of a whist club, a bridge club, maybe model airplanes, whatever it is. We like to gather together with other people who share an interest with us, or who have a common attitude, or have gone through a similar experience, something like this. And the church is a place where we love to gather as well, those of us who are Christians. You probably have 2 or 3 circles of friends who you meet with. Different groups of people with different interests or different experiences you have. I can imagine a man, for example, being part of a group of football supporters, and that's one group of people. And then he's part of, let's say, a model airplane club. Maybe he goes along to Alcoholics Anonymous as well. See, 3 different groups, totally different people, but they all relate to different aspects of this man. And the church is a place where we love to meet other Christians who share the same outlook on life, gone through similar experience, have the same goals in life. Jesus gave a very stark statement, and this is what we're coming to today in Mark chapter 3, verse 31 to 35. And at first glance, it can be a bit frightening. Let's see what he says. Then Jesus' mother and brothers arrived. Standing outside, they sent someone in to call him. A crowd was sitting around him, and they told him, "Your mother and brothers are outside looking for you." "Who are my mother and brothers?" he asked. And looking around those seated in a circle around him, he said, "Here are my mother and my brothers. Whoever does God's will is my mother and sister and brother." That's quite harsh words on face value. I think people, non-Christian people, are quite right to be worried when a member of their family starts taking a very keen interest in a religious group, because we immediately think of the cults. And one thing a cult will do is try and drag you away from your family, to isolate you from your family, to tell you you can't trust your family. You are to sever all relationships with them. And those who love you in your family, they worry about you. Even if it's a good, solid, biblical Christian church, people who don't know about these things get a bit twitchy and a bit worried. But is that what Jesus was encouraging here when he told everybody, they aren't my family, this is my family? People tended to have one of 3 reactions to Jesus when he walked the earth, and they do today. The first reaction is to follow him, to serve him, to learn from him, to trust him, to be his disciple. Then there are those who aren't bothered, really. In Jesus' time, there were those people who thought, well, it's fun to have around, it's interesting talks he gives, he might heal somebody, but they're not really that interested in what he's really saying and really doing. And there are those who vehemently opposed him and wanted rid of him. Those who loved him, those who were apathetic, and those who hated him. And it's very easy for us to look at our own hearts and think, which one of these 3 groups am I in? It's an easy thing to do. But for his family, it would have been more complicated than that, wouldn't it? Because his family loved him, and they knew him, and they were committed to him as family. And so when they looked at what he did and what he was doing, what was happening to him, what he was teaching, they had this extra layer to go through as they decided what their reaction to him would be. because they loved him, they cared for him, they knew him. Even if they vehemently disagreed with him, they still loved him as their family. And Jesus now is the man of the house. His earthly father is presumed to have died, and the leader, the oldest child in the family. And so it was very difficult for them. But we're told very clearly, earlier in the chapter, verse 21, Jesus' mother and brothers said to the crowd, Jesus is out of his mind. He's out of his mind. John tells us in chapter 7 that, very starkly, his brothers did not believe in him. So we learn straight away that being in Jesus' natural family did not make them automatically members of his spiritual family, his biological, natural, legal family. It's quite distinct to his spiritual family. So right away we learn, but they are not one and the same. There are these two distinct groups: natural, biological, legal family, and the spiritual family. So Jesus wasn't rejecting his family. He was saying this is a different relationship. This is a different context. But did he act like a cult in separating people from their families? And did his followers encourage such a thing? No. No. What Jesus' most dedicated, devoted disciple, Peter, he went to Jesus one day and he said, "My wife's mother is sick." And Jesus went to the house where Peter's mother-in-law lived, and he healed her. He didn't say to Peter, "Well, don't worry about them. They're your old family. You need to worry just about your new family. Ignore them, forget them, sever all links with them." No, he went and he healed Peter's wife's mother. In teaching the church, how the letters in the New Testament are mainly about teaching us how to act as churches. What churches should look like, what church members should be like, committed Christians, how we should behave, etc. Do we get any idea in these letters that we should be distancing ourselves from our families? In 1 Corinthians, Paul just mentions in passing, really, but there are other people, other ministers, who were teaching about Jesus, who were travelling and leading churches, etc. And they took their wives and families with them as they went. Paul chose not to do that, or it wasn't his situation. But it was perfectly reasonable and acceptable for these other people to take their wives and families with them. And there's no mention of, oh yes, but only if they're Christians, and leave them if they're not. No, there was none of that. So that seems to imply to me that the family carries on being part of your family. Also in that letter, he addresses the issue, what should you do if you find yourself married to a non-Christian? He says very clearly, do not divorce them. Do not divorce them. You see, the cults would say to you, oh, you need to divorce them. They don't follow the one true path. They're not on the same spiritual wavelength as you. Divorce them and come and live with your new true family. Paul says, do not divorce them. Stay committed to your family. Stay married. Have that marriage relationship. You know, do the shopping together, watch TV together, go on walks in the countryside together, support and help each other in the home, or whatever the dynamic is in the family. Be a normal, everyday married couple and carry on doing that. Peter addressed the issue, and he specifically thinks about a Christian lady married to a non-Christian man, which actually is much more common than the other way around. And he says to this Christian lady, don't nag him, don't keep getting on at him about the gospel, but love him all the more. Love him. Increase your devotion. Show him your faith in your purity, in your gentleness, and in your reverence. Become a more loving, more gentle, more humble, more forgiving, more understanding, and more godly wife. That is the way to be with your husband. Don't leave him, stay with him, and do even better. Mary and Jesus' brothers, it would have been very hard for them to see the one they loved being treated the way he was by those Jewish leaders. To see the antagonism that grew up around him, the controversy, the hatred which was beginning to grow against him. It would have been very hard for them to see that. I think this is our son. And they'd also been thinking, well, he was supposed to be the Messiah. The angel told Mary that. And the Jews knew what the Messiah would be like. They had it in their mind. They'd received it down through the generations, exactly what the Messiah was supposed to be like. The first thing he was supposed to do was garner the support of the Jewish leaders. Be warmly embraced and welcomed and exalted by them. And yet, they saw Jesus, and there's this animosity from the Jewish leaders. They did not accept him. They were upset by him. So that wasn't the way the Messiah was supposed to be. Secondly, the Messiah was supposed to come and bring the nation back to proper, true worship, to re-establish temple worship and a greater adherence to the Jewish law that God had given Moses. Did Jesus come and say we must worship more, we must be more devoted to the law? No, he didn't, you see. He went to the temple and he threw the people out. At one point he said, yes, the law is very important, and not one stroke of the pen of the law is going to disappear. It's all important. At other times he just doesn't seem to be that bothered about it. He did things against the law, and like letting the disciples eat corn on the Sabbath day. So he was sending mixed messages out about the law, not what the Messiah they thought was supposed to do. And thirdly, the Messiah was supposed to really unite the nation together and lead them in overthrowing the shackles of their colonial masters, at this time being the Romans. He's supposed to be a great political, military leader as well. And yet Jesus didn't do any of that. He didn't seem that bothered about politics at all. Regarding the Romans, he said, pay your taxes to the Romans. Respect them as the leaders that God had put here before you. He said, I'm not really worried about political things that much. I'm worried about spiritual things. So he wasn't measuring up as the Messiah should have done. And so Mary and the brothers and sisters, they would have thought, something's gone wrong here. Something's gone wrong. He's not the Messiah he was supposed to be. We need to take him home. He's not well. He's mentally not well. He's out of his mind, they said. They take him home, rest him, love him, give him comfort food. Mary wanted to mother him, because that's what mothers do. But after the resurrection, they did believe in him. They did follow him as part of his spiritual family. His two brothers, James and Jude, became leaders. James was the first leader of the first Christian church there in Jerusalem right after Pentecost. Time of great persecution, he was prepared to give his life in his discipleship of following Jesus. And he did give his life for the sake of the gospel. And James and the other brother Jude, they wrote letters as Christian leaders, and we have a letter from each of them, were deemed to be so inspired, to be so important, to be from the mouth of God, but they are included in our scriptures, in our New Testaments. So we see that the family moved from not believing in him, to saying he's out of his mind, to following him and loving him and being part of his spiritual family. So in Mark chapter 3, he says, these are not my family, because they didn't put God first in their lives at that point. They are not my family. My family are those who do the will of God. But they did become part of that family later, when they understood from the resurrection from the grave. So we have these two distinct groups: our families, our natural, legal, biological family, call it what you will, and our spiritual family. They're two distinct groups. But did Jesus say we should leave our families to join the spiritual family? No, and I think we've seen that. He's saying you must consider the two things. You see, being related to Jesus didn't make them followers of Jesus or believers in Jesus. And sometimes too, we may be in a Christian family, but that doesn't make us followers of Jesus. We have to make our own choices, our own decisions. God has no grandchildren, it's been said. Your parents being Christian isn't enough. You need to make your own commitment before God. Express your own appreciation for Jesus dying for you on that cross. I love my church family, my spiritual family. I've missed them during lockdown. The rest of the lockdown hasn't bothered me that much, but I've missed my spiritual family. Now, the church family, like any family, has its problems at times. They can cause a lot of pain. Oh yes. They can be infuriating at times. They can make mistakes. But when it works well, the spiritual family is a wonderful thing. It's a place where you can relax and be yourself and be at home. It's a place where there's love, there's grace, forgiveness, acceptance, encouragement. Usually lots of food and lots of coffee. Not always the best coffee, but it's a lovely place. And I miss my spiritual family. I miss being able to get together, meet together, hear the scriptures read together, sing hymns to God together, pray together. We miss these things. But it's a challenge for us here in lockdown to think, well, when it's over and we're able to meet again, am I going to be committed? Am I going to be apathetic? Or am I going to be just dismissive of Christianity, of everything Jesus said and did? This is an opportunity for us to take stock and think, no, the new normal for me is that I am going to be a brother, a sister of Jesus in his spiritual family. Thank you. God bless you.